am here today with Robin and Steve DePaola. Robin and I have known one another for a very long time. I don't want to tell our age, Robin, but I am a year older than you.
Perhaps.
Didn't you graduate in 87?
I did, but when I came to Brookwood, I chose to stay back a year, so we probably are the same age.
We may be closer in age than
Right,
we realize,
right.
yes. But I have known you a very long time.
Yes, we have.
And you're originally from Cairo.
No, I'm originally from Wiggum.
I'm sorry. We will make sure we differentiate between Wiggum and Cairo because there is a difference.
There is a difference, but it's really just a pinprick on the map of Georgia.
That's
you
right.
Really can't find maybe either one. Yeah,
Okay.
I grew up on a really large working farm, and at one point, just before my dad passed away, we had 5,000 acres that he was working, and there was lots of livestock and lots of produce grown, and so yeah, it was a really large working farm.
Were you one of those kids who would have to get up early in the morning and work before you went to school?
Oh, no. No, that was not. I mean, I had responsibility for my horse, but other than that, I did not have to work necessarily before I went to school.
So you weren't out milking cows?
Oh, no.
Or...
There were no cows to be milked. No. There were beef cows and lots of hogs on the property, but no milk cows.
Okay. I guess I just remember reading Billy Graham's autobiography,
Right.
and he did grow up on a dairy farm, and that was hard work. So
Yeah.
I don't feel sorry for you growing up on a farm. Though.
No, don't feel sorry for me.
Do you guys still grow any vegetables?
Once my mom took over, she ended up renting the property out. And when she passed away 10 years ago, we chose to continue that rental process. And so we have a farmer who rents, and everything that's not tillable for either peanuts or cotton is planted in pine trees. So it's kind of a nice place to go out and fish now for us when we can get over there. But my brother and his family live on the property.
Steve, I don't know much about you, so you better just tell me, where are you from?
Southern California, Pomona, California.
So how in the world did you end up in South Georgia?
Good question. I went to graduate school at the University of Memphis. That's where I got my PhD. So wherever you get your PhD, unless you're a mega superstar, you're kind of stuck geographically. And so I got my first job at Georgia Southwestern in Americus. And then I moved for a little bit to Auburn University in Montgomery, and then came back to Thomasville.
So how did you two come to meet one another?
We met at Thomas University. I've been there 18 years. She's been there for 16 years. I spent a lot of time raising my boys. So I was married for a long time, did the rebound, got in a relationship really quick. We had Parker. Parker's a great kid. He's 20. And then I didn't really date or do anything. I raised my boys. Gosh, it was 12 years, 13 years before I thought about anybody. And it was Robin.
We've been friends from really, I think, the first day I came out there. I went out in May to prepare for my very first class there, and Steve was one of the people I met. And through all of the different things that we've been through, both caregiving for both of our moms, really, and through other just family issues, we were buddies. And we'd come and chat with one another and talk with one another. And then Steve was just a lifeline through a major family issue and crisis. And out of that blossomed this beautiful relationship. And I'm so blessed every day.
Well, yeah, I think we got to know each other's kids. I mean, she got to see the boys grow up on campus because they were with me all the time. And for some reason, when I saw her in town, I would run up behind her and scream and scare her. I don't know how many times I did that.
So many times I cannot count.
So that must have been what really attracted you to Steve.
Oh, yes.
Was being scared
Being
like that.
scared all the time. No, not at all. Just his compassion and his care for people. Steve has a deep passion for people, and you see it in his teaching. You see it in the way he interacts with people, and so that's the attraction there. That has a heart for others.
I love the fact that when you guys married, then you really were the Brady Bunch in a sense, because Steve, you have 3 boys, right?
Yes.
And then you've got a boy, 2 girls.
That's right. Yes.
So how old were the kids when y'all got married?
Oh, I have to do some subtraction now.
Let's see. Jordan must have been 19.
So
But Jordan,
Jordan would have been 19.
and then Spencer was 2021. Spencer was the best man.
Right.
And there was Parker. All the
So,
kids were in the
yeah.
wedding except Jordan.
Yeah, Parker and Hannah. So if Jordan and Rob were 19, Parker and Hannah would have been 16, 17, and Megan would have been 13, 14.
Wow.
So the Brady Bunch, but with kind of teenagers and young adults.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Oh, God bless you. I know that. Going through that now because I have one who just graduated high school and then another one who is 21. And so they do seem to be finding themselves during those ages, don't they?
Yes, definitely.
And I know today that the purpose of us being here is because we're going to talk about Spencer quite a bit. When I talk about people who are no longer living on this earth, I don't refer to them as being dead. I refer to them as having a different address. And believers in Christ go on to live. So their life doesn't end. It really just begins with Christ. And so that's what has happened with Spencer. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but before we get into the meat of your story, I do want to ask you guys a couple of random questions because I always say people just like to know random stuff.
Yeah.
So I wondered, have you ever dropped food on the floor and then eaten it?
Probably more than I'm willing to admit. There's the 5-second rule there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, I'm not going to judge you because I do it all the time. And if I'm too lazy to pick it up, I have a dog who'll come eat it. Yeah.
Yes, there are 3 of those creatures in our house and a whole clat of cats. And
Yeah.
so if we don't get it, they do.
Yeah. My friend has a funny story about a cat because, you know, cats never are like dogs. They never are foraging around for food like dogs do. Well, one time we went out of town and we had left the dogs at the house and we had neighbors coming and taking care of the pets and feeding everybody. And one of the dog was on a medication, and you'll remember Heath Farnadoe.
Mm-hmm.
He and his wife were taking care of our animals in the house for us, and so he had to wrap some medicine in like a piece of ham or something. And he's holding it out, and all of a sudden our cat came by and grabbed the medicine with the ham on it. What cat does that? That never happens.
Yeah, ours are too lazy for that.
We have a giant Great Dane pit bull who gets
Ooh.
fed all the time. He's a big baby, but he lurks around, and he's so cute that you end up giving him part of dinner.
Let's move on a little bit. I do want to talk some about Spencer and the way that you and I, the two of you and I, we even came to talk about this as we were all at the Y one day. Robin and I just started talking because we've had a connection forever, and I honestly did not know what had happened to your son, and it made me very sad that I didn't know that. In doing this podcast, one of the sad things about it is our town of Thomasville has more people than I want to know who have had children who have gone on to heaven. And I know we talked about this when we were at Grassroots before meeting today. It's just almost an uncanny thing how many people have gone through this. But I really want to thank you for sharing Spencer's story, because everybody that goes through this, even though you have bonds with people who have gone through the same thing, the situations are very different. I know just in doing some research about Spencer, I was just amazed at his depth in his faith. For a 23 when he had his accident, reading about, just even looking at his obituary and y'all talking about how his FCA Bible was just so worn and it had underlinings all over it. That has to be a source of comfort, knowing that he had that strong faith and now he's with the Lord.
I think for me, what was always powerful about Spencer and his relationship with God was it was so childlike. It was so simple. There was no complexity to it. It was be obedient to God. God will take care of you. And that childlikeness I have always envied. I question everything I'm critical with, but it was just the way it was for Spencer. And it was easy to accept it. And he didn't understand my struggle with it, my academic struggle, why I would question. He would give this kind of silly grin, like, it's you, Dad, overthinking stuff again. But I always admired that in him.
Mm-hmm. We could learn a lot from being more childlike
Mm-hmm.
in our faith and our belief in God. I agree with that. Did you see that in him as a little boy when he was growing up, or when did you really see his faith starting to blossom?
We had talked about it a lot, so it was always there, and he was good at questioning stuff. I remember when we were little once, I told him that we had to help other people that were needy. Well, sure enough, that week we're at the store, and an older gentleman comes up and asks for money. And I said, no, I can't help you. And then Spencer called me on it. Daddy, we just talked about helping other people out. Can't you give him any money? So we drove after the guy and gave him, however much money I had. So there was an interest in taking care of other people. He always wanted to take care of other people. But he went to Talavana Christian for a while and Hasilla, and that's where he got this strong biblical background. He read his Bible. It was just part of everything. So when we were running late for something, Spencer would say, God just wants us to spend extra time together. He's given us the opportunity. So it was ingrained in him somehow, but I'm not going to take responsibility for it.
He had there was this dynamic feature to his faith that I think so many of us really wrestle with, but it was kind of cut and dry. Fear God. Don't fear anybody else. Don't fear anything else. And he really lived Psalms 34, where he talks about, where David's talking and saying that the angel of the Lord will encamp around you. That was Spencer. He had no concern, no fear, no anything of anything on earth or anybody on earth, but it was God, and it was that holy fear that ignites that deep faith. And I think many of us just marvel at that. How does someone so young, how does anyone really have that without asking questions? Spencer didn't have to ask questions. He knew.
He talked about, what was it? Which verse?
Revelations. So his favorite verses were Revelations 21:4, and whenever he would mention his grandmother or mention other events, he would repeat this verse, and it just says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. For Spencer, that was what it was all about, to think that every tear will be wiped away. And
he talked to us about 2 weeks before he died. We're having this conversation about things, and my mom had passed away 3 years before. He talked about the verse, and he said, I just have to believe that. I just have to believe this. That was it. No questioning. My life revolves around this. My life revolves around God. End of statement. And it was at that time we had went to the movie, The Case
for Christ.
The Case for Christ.
The Case for Christ. And he was just puzzled with this and giving us that grinning look like, you silly people, you don't get it. And then we got into this topic, and it's, I have to believe this. Period. End of it. And I will, until I die, have trouble saying, I just have to believe this. Period. End of it. I will question it.
But I think that has that academic piece of us that's always pulling something apart and always digging deeper and always trying to find the root of information. I mean, that's just part of who we are. And Spencer had that too, but in a different area of his life. But for him, faith was faith. You believe, period.
And he wasn't really afraid of anything else. It was, I fear God. I'm not supposed to fear man, so why am I going to waste time? And he used to tell us, you guys worry too much about work, God's got it. You worry too much about politics, God's got it. And he would give that grin. We'd be on our cell phones looking at the local politics or the national politics. And he'd shake his head and grin. And
I think he called us silly once or twice.
It just amazes me, again, that someone that young could have that much depth. For somebody's favorite scripture to be in Revelation and to be that young, because so many people are intimidated by the book of Revelation. So I think that's pretty amazing, too. And that scripture, Robin, that you just read, it's almost like he was giving you his life verse to comfort you.
That came back in so many ways. 2 weeks after the accident, well, let me back up. During the summer, that summer, Spencer had been in charge of a church league, basketball league. And he assembled the team, he marshaled that team, everything. And the final game was played 2 weeks after the accident. Well, Parker assumed his brother's role and tried to fill those shoes. And in the end, the East Side team won. But in the middle of it, at halftime, Parker grabbed my arm and pulled me outside of Victory Baptist and just collapsed on the ground, and he's sobbing. And I couldn't figure out, for a few minutes, he couldn't even talk. And he said, I know where Spencer was, and Steve's going to tell you more about the accident and the emergency room and all of that in a bit. But Spencer had a cardiac arrest, and they did CPR for 14 minutes and got him back. Parker was referring to those 14 minutes, and he said, I know where Spencer was. He was at the gates of heaven, and he was saying, I need to go back because I need them to know that I'm going to be okay. When they know that I'm going to be okay, I'll come back. Parker has never, ever talked about this again, but it was such a profound moment where Parker even was assured of this verse in Revelations, that Spencer was living that. Death would be no more. He knew where Spencer was during those 14 minutes and now. And you're right, the address has changed, but his presence is still with us.
I think it was amazing. He didn't go into cardiac arrest until after I got at the hospital. And then he went into cardiac arrest. And there was a bunch of time I had by myself there, at which point I questioned God. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't get a bill for the room that I was in. I mean, I was screaming, I was crying, I was alternating between being on my knees, praying. And it was overwhelming. 2 weeks before, though, Spencer had gone into this. I mean, there's almost one sense is that Spencer and God were trying to prepare us. It was just an odd 2 weeks. He was reminiscing. We were talking about a couple of older preachers that we had in America, looking stuff up on them. He wanted to know if they were still alive. But yeah, he was reminiscing, talking. He went to visit his mom in America, and he went to look at all the parks that Spencer and I had went to as a child, and he came back and told us this. And the day that he died, we were sharing with our faculty friends. It was the first day of the semester, or our work day before the semester, and we were sharing his picture from American Ninja Warriors and talking to them, and people were going, what did the one Lisa say?
That he's your son, and because he had spent 2 years just really, for lack of better terms, sculpting his body. He radically changed his diet. He radically changed everything that he had been doing, and he focused that in on building that tent that God has given us. And it was amazing because he understood each part of a muscle. Not just, I need to work my biceps. No, he knew that there were 3 parts or 4 parts. Or I don't know how many parts to a bicep there are, but he could tell you that, and he could tell you exactly what you needed to do to work and build that muscle structure. And he had done that. And it was, short of any other word, miraculous.
So it was almost like there was this preparation for us.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a preparation the whole year.
Yeah.
We lost a friend in January. He had a stroke at Walmart. And Spencer would go to the hospital with the family and pray. And Spencer was also, when they were taking him off life support, it was Spencer that gave us that puzzling grin. You guys don't get it. Vince wants to go to heaven. He's always wanted to go to heaven. Why are you guys denying this to him? So again, it's this young kid telling the adults who are all worried we can't take Vince off of life support, it's not fair. And Spencer saying, no, it's not fair because he's always wanted to go to heaven. And then we had Winnell pass away, and she was in a nursing home. And Spencer went to visit her and loved her up. And then it was Spencer's turn. I mean, Winnell's, I did her eulogy at the end of July. 2 weeks later, Spencer died.
When you were talking about all of that, that reminded me when Peter told Jesus's response to Peter was, "Get thee behind me, Satan. These things must happen." It's like Spencer had an innate way of just knowing that, guys, everything's okay. This has to happen. If you trust God, then why would this even be an issue for this person to transition to their new life?
And that's powerful. I mean, even Jordan said at one point, Daddy, Spencer had to go before you because you would have been difficult. It would have been difficult for Spencer if you died.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's so true. One of the very poignant memories I will always have of Spencer is at his grandmother's service. And you would not have, I don't know that I've ever seen someone who grieved so much. And I think he didn't understand why there would be food afterwards. No, we're here to really focus on grandma and not on ourselves. So why are you going to eat something? But he
stayed away from the food. It's time to grieve grandma. We had it at Cherokee Lake. People brought food, but he refused to participate. He stayed by himself and said, we focus on grandma now. We miss her.
And that's a very respectful way to look at things as well as a young person, because I think so many young people think, well, I'm invincible. I would never have to think about death until I'm in my 90s. The minute that we're born on this earth, we technically start to die. And so I think that it's something for us to look at that's not morbid, but we prepare ourselves here on this earth for what's to come. And I see that so much in Spencer's story, because I know our bodies will get new bodies, resurrected bodies one day, but still, God does want us to take care of this temple, because we are God's vessel on this earth. But not only was Spencer taking care of his outward body, but he was also taking care of his soul.
Definitely.
Yeah, 2 weeks before, he said, I think I'm going to die before I'm 40. And that would just irritate me.
Oh, I wouldn't have wanted to have heard that.
No.
So, he knew ahead of time that he wasn't going to live. Most of us want to live forever.
Yeah, right.
He knew it was time limited.
Yeah. We want to live forever on this earth, this broken earth.
Our thinking is so corrupted by what we think is perfect and good, and at heart we know it's not.
Right.
But he never had to think about that. He knew this is not where I want to be. He was one funny story about Spencer, as far as taking care of that outward temple, that outward tent. There'd been an issue, and I went to Walmart to help him with it, and he was waiting for me by the cakes and the desserts, which this kid did not eat. Sugar was not a part of his diet, except for on his birthday, and there was one specific chocolate pie from Burger King that he would eat. But he was standing there, and he kind of was holding up this chocolate cake, which surprised me, and he said, I'm not sure if there should be a smiley face or a skull and crossbones on this. And he learned that early. It's taken us a lot longer to learn just how seriously we should take that. But he was serious about what he put inside of him.
Yeah.
And it showed.
I think for me, one of the blessings, I got to talk to him twice that day. Once before I went into the Y, and then 8 minutes before the accident, I got to talk to him. That's a blessing. It doesn't get better than that. And we knew something was wrong. Because we had talked about him so much that day, showing his picture, telling people about American Ninja Warriors. we went to help students move in at the dorm. And the first thing we said to each other is, we need Spencer here because he is so good personally with these guys. He would help them get adjusted. So we were talking about him the whole day, and I hadn't heard. He would call. We'd talk multiple times for a short bit when he was doing something. Daddy, I'm coming here. I'm going there. This is what I'm doing. I'm coming over to the house. But we hadn't heard from him. I hadn't heard from him all day. So I sent him a text about an NBA player that was arrested, hoping to get a response. I just remember feeling awkward the entire day.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Oh, it was miserable.
That was in August of 2017 that you're talking about. So we haven't really talked much about what happened. So do you guys mind kind of let's go back to that day? And you just described that things were really awkward. You were talking about him a lot, couldn't get in touch with him. And at some point, you get a text or a phone call. So do you mind just kind of walking us through that?
I was going to the Y to work out, stopped to get gas, and I received a text message from my neighbor, Micah, who said, call me right away. So I called him right away, and he said, Spencer's been in an accident. And I think my first words were, is he still alive? And Micah didn't know. So Micah said he'd meet me at the hospital. I also got an Atlanta phone call. I called that. That was a trooper. Did the same thing. Is my son still alive? And he said he didn't know. I called Robin right away. I left the gas station. I was panicked. I called you. I was screaming.
It took me a few minutes to, maybe not minutes, but it seemed like forever to understand what Steve was saying. And I just said, we're coming. And
I think at some point I said, if something happens to him, I can't go on, or something like that.
Yeah. And at that point, we didn't really know anything.
I ran into the ER, and I was panicked, and I said, I'm here for my son, and they said, does he have heart issues? And I said, no, he's athletic. And they put me in a little room by myself, which was absolutely insane. I mean, the worst fears happen, but that's all you're thinking. I think I was throwing things, hitting things. Sometimes it was on my knees. Finally, the doctor came in, and the doctor looked stressed. I mean, he couldn't even look me in the eyes. And I said, is it serious? And he said, it's serious, serious, serious. And then he told me about the 14 minutes, and he asked about his heart. Well, of course, if you've lost blood, you're going to be tachycardic. That's just medicine. And he said, I have to go back in. There are 2 other doctors with him. And I said, tell Spencer I love him. And then he left, and I think you found me because I was yelling at God. I was yelling at anybody. I was swearing. In between, I had called Jordan, and Jordan and I hadn't talked for 2 years. That was my fault. And, Jordan instantly said, we'll be there, which was great. I think I told you at one point after I talked with the doctor. The doctor didn't tell me he wasn't going to make it. I called Robin and said he's not going to make it.
Yeah. Steve had the car, and our other vehicle was with one of the children at work, and I called her and said, I need you to come get me right now. Spencer's been in an accident. And at that point, that's what I knew. Megan and I started walking towards where the van was. It was like, if I have to walk to the hospital, I'm going to do that.
Were you at the university
we were
at that? Or you were at home?
Yeah, we were at home. On the way, I began making phone calls. In the conversation with Steve, he said, Spencer's not going to make it. And I said, how do you know? And he said, I just know. I said, did the doctor tell you this? I mean, it was like this. He said, I just know. The concern was that Parker was at football practice, and how are we need to get Parker. We need to get him there. And the girls were going to go and get him. And I said, no, let's go in. Let's find Steve. Let's figure out what's going on, and then we'll figure out what to do to get Parker here. Well, we walked in the hospital, and I was walking up to the desk, and Steve burst out of the room. and I didn't need to ask anybody where he was at that point. And the neighbor that Parker was taken care of, so he arrived shortly thereafter. But Steve had been there by himself all of that time, and it may have only been a few minutes, but it was an eternity.
The neighbor that had sent me the text, he went and got Parker. And I think what was sad about that, Parker had moved in full time from South Carolina, 3 months before? How many months?
5 months.
5 months before. And Spencer and Parker were really close. Spencer would go to his bedroom and throw him a kiss. And Spencer wouldn't leave the bedroom door unless Parker caught it.
Yeah. So there had come a point where at the Y, people were calling Parker SJ, so Spencer Jr. And as we left the ER that night, Parker said, "I don't ever want to be called SJ again." And it was really hard for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And one of the big issues I've never seen Parker cry. I think when the doctor came in at 6:09 and I saw him out of the corner of my eye and I screamed no, and the room was packed. I saw him and I knew it, And I think the vice president, John Mice, I was talking to him, so I was right in front of him, and then, I melted down. And you said I jumped or vaulted or...
Yes, it was like he had been thrown backwards. But we've talked often. I can't tell you who was in the room and how many people were in the room, but it felt like the room was packed.
It was quiet though after I just saw him.
Yeah.
And he headed straight for me and just said, "I'm so sorry."
And Steve, what do you think gave you that knowing that when you called Robin and said he's not going to make it? Was it because that doctor came in and said it's serious, it's serious, it's serious? Or do you think you somehow just knew in your spirit that...
I think a combination of things. We just didn't feel comfortable that day. So yeah, in my spirit it was, he's gone home. The doctor looked stressed, but the whole situation didn't feel right. And I knew it. No one had to tell me. And just the doctor coming in, I knew it. So at a deep level, yeah.
I've said, I told Steve this a long time ago, but there was such a deep connection between Steve and Spencer, to the point that I've told Steve several times that Spencer, like Peter Pan, Spencer was that happy thought. There's that scene in Hook where Peter discovers that happy thought, that it's Daddy. And that's what it was. This is a man who wanted to be an academician, wanted to be a researcher, wanted to be, focused on that. And Spencer changed that. Spencer changed his complete heart, so much so that he comes to Thomas University and makes a career out of teaching, not researching, teaching. It was such a different change, but it was because of his connection with Spencer and with Jordan and with Parker. But Spencer was that happy thought for Steve. And so, in answering that question, that connection was so deep. And if we think about it, there was so much that we should have paid attention to. The reminiscing, the not getting in touch. And literally Spencer called every other hour at least. And that was not a bad thing. That was his way of staying connected with his dad. And it was a sweet, sweet connection.
I think Jordan and Spencer have always called me Daddy. Spencer and Jordan to this day, Daddy. Parker's, he calls me different, Father or Dad or something, but that's, just the way it is. Talking about him all day, showing pictures, it was just strange. And he spent the night at our house the night before.
Something very heavy was burdening his heart, and we knew that. Spencer was not a young man who was going to sit anywhere any length of time. The Wednesday, his accident happened on a Thursday. That Wednesday, he barely left this one chair in our home. It was so weird. He even commented, "Gosh, I don't think I've had a day like this in forever." Mm-hmm. And he didn't rest well that night. He woke us up at like 2 and asked for some melatonin, and both Parker and Megan mentioned that they saw him awake really, really late. It's almost that burden that, I mean, I'm not trying to equate the two, but Christ prayed the night before his crucifixion. Almost that burden of knowing what's coming, but and not wanting to burden others. We don't know what was heavy on his heart. What did he tell you about that?
Oh, he said, "I'm not the type of guy to share stuff like that."
We don't know what that burden was, but it was heavy for him.
It was. The summer was weird with Winnell's death, but during the summer he also said he wanted to do research in exercise physiology, which was really cool because if you're involved in research in graduate school and for a period afterward, that's just a big deal. Your son says, "This is what I want to do." He had a guy he not idolized, but was a role model at Tampa University. And he showed us his work and video, and for me that was really cool. That was a big deal. But again, it's like everything was being tied up.
Steve's proud of his sons, period. And everything he's done, it's because he loves them so much. The night that Spencer left after saying, "Dad, this is what I really think I want to do," gosh, you could have, Steve was above the roof of the house. You could pull him down. He was so excited and proud of Spencer. Looked forward to hearing about those research endeavors, and there's still a Spencer research project that we have that he actually mapped out enough that we can carry that out. We just haven't pulled that open yet.
And he loved Thomas University. I mean, what he wanted to do first was be the strength and conditioning coach at Thomas University. So in my head, that's just, oh my gosh, I'm teaching there and my son's working there. And then what was his comment about FSU? And he loved Georgia State, of course.
So he is a diehard Georgia football fan, just loves Georgia. And but he was living in his grandmother's home, and there's, again, that deep connection with his grandmother. Talked about his grandparents all the time. He said, "I really would like to go to Georgia, but I think the commute is a little bit tough. Like, how far is it between Athens and Thomasville?" I said, "Spencer, it's about 5 hours." Because, I don't think I can do that. I don't really like FSU very much, but that's more doable. I was like, yeah, that's more doable.
He wasn't going to leave Grandma's house.
No, he was not. He wanted to be within commuting distance.
It's also remarkable to me that at such a young age, he seemed to have found his calling. Because I really believe that each one of us has a calling. And there's a scripture that I kind of live by from Ephesians 1:18-20 that talks about God's given a calling to each one of us, and with the same power that he used to raise Jesus from the dead, he gives us that power to fulfill our callings. Sometimes I feel like I'm still looking for that at my age, but to be, again, 23 years old and to be that passionate about really wanting to help people. And I totally agree with everything Spencer believed in, that our clean eating and taking care of our bodies is so important. And for him to have wanted to have, but other people have a hard time grasping that. And for him to be able to have that vision that, yes, I think I can help people understand how their body works and how they can be their best.
Well, it's interesting. He went through the party period, and then it was just stop, and he worked at the plaza, and then the plaza people went to SAS, and he kept getting calls, come work with us. And I kind of got irritated. It's like, they're offering you a job, you need to take it. And finally he said, "I used to party with those people. I'm not going to go work there because I don't want to go back to old ways." And he had gotten it. I didn't get it.
In his desire to help people, he really knew what he needed to do to continue in this direction that he was headed. But he had come to a point where he had gotten his training certificate, athletic training certificate, or personal training certificate. He would he would help people just by saying, hey, if you do this, this will help you. But he would also come home very troubled because he would have observed a young person maybe lifting weights in a way that would hurt them, or just doing a technique that wasn't quite the way it needed to be. And he struggled with whether or not he should say something. What we have learned in these years after this accident is that in some cases he did say something, and that made a really profound impact on that young person. And people still come to Steve and the Y, say, hey, here's a Spencer story, and those are just treasures.
Yeah,
those are treasures.
He got really attached. Brother Gary at Victory Baptist, the summer league was with that church. And Brother Gary and Spencer got really attached. Spencer would follow him around after the games and talk with him. And Brother Gary loved it because Brother Gary said, here I am, this old guy, and I've got this young guy talking to me after the game and following me around. So he was easy to get attached to. Mm-hmm. And he was training people. He wouldn't charge money, so he got that from us. But he was training people at J.C. Penney, as they got rid of stuff. But he was having them do pull-ups on the racks that were left and walking around the store. Mm-hmm. There were all sorts of stories like that.
Right.
And he was checking up on people. We didn't know that until after he had died. He'd go check on somebody at the technical college, stop by randomly. That was all neat stuff to hear.
Has that brought some healing for you with everything that has happened? I know a mom who also has a son that went to heaven, and I said, what is it that you want to be known about your son now that he's not on this earth anymore? And she said, I want people to remember him. Mm-hmm. And so when you have people come up to you and they share those stories with you, that has to be like a healing balm to your soul to know that Spencer has not been forgotten. People still remember him.
That's pretty powerful. I mean, those things. He was a good kid. That validates that. I mean, and that's one of the things people will say. He was a good kid. He was so sweet. He was so nice. I had one guy at the Y say he was such a great guy. When I'd share my stuff with him, he acted interested. So he was just a nice kid. And I think the confidence that he had with his relationship with God, he did have a little swagger. Mm-hmm. The story at J.C. Penney was when he'd come in at 3 o'clock, there were a group of females that would watch him get out of his truck and swagger in. He's 5'3", 5'4". So I think there was this confidence that came from his relationship with God. Don't have it that easily. I've got to puff myself up to get it going.
Identity. It sounds like he really knew that his identity was with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely.
That's what he stood for.
There was no questions. I know we've said this before, but he identified so much with Christ and with his walk, and every part of that calling that you talked about, that was wrapped up in it for him. He clearly understood who he was, what he needed to do to grow spiritually, physically, and he was going to do those things. And he had really come to a point that he was going. One of the things that he wanted to do so much was to be a contestant on American Ninja Warrior. He had said, I'm going to win, and when I do, I'm going to open a gym here in Thomasville. He had this vision to give back to the community. He would have come back to Thomasville. If you had sent him away to graduate school for 8 years, he would have come right back here. Whatever he learned, he was going to give back to this community. And I think that's part of that identity that you're talking about. And that is so wrapped up in the giving that
he loved this town. I mean,
he loved Thomasville.
Most of our kids want to get out of Thomasville.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
This was the best thing in the world. He was never going to leave this place. That was it. Bottom line. This is grandma's house. I love Thomasville. Why would he didn't understand why kids would leave. He just thought that was silly.
Speaking of kids, how are all of the siblings doing with everything that's happened?
Over the last, I'd say, 6 months, Parker has finally begun talking about Spencer. I can't remember what precipitated this, but there was some joking going on, and Steve said something about not hearing from Spencer lately, and Parker made the joke of, yeah, well, he's gotten really bad about communicating with us. Which was good because Parker hadn't really, he didn't want to talk about Spencer. He didn't want to talk about the accident. He didn't want to talk about what happened. Other than that night at that basketball game, for almost 3 years, Parker didn't say a whole lot about Spencer. But now there's this joking that's kind of going on, which Spencer, by the way, would absolutely love.
Yes,
he would love that so much.
He wouldn't want everybody just all down in the mouth, sad all the time.
But
He'd be annoyed.
To know that I'm okay, guys.
Right. That's that faith piece, right? So the faith piece would be, why are you doing this? Why are you acting this way? I'm good. I'm fine.
Well, I mean, another piece to all of this too is, the power of God making sense out of everything and preparing people.
Right.
A year before Spencer's accident, Parker was in a rollover accident.
Oh my gosh.
And nothing happened. Nothing happened to Parker. So the first thing Parker said when he got into the trauma bay was, "This should have been me."
Oh no.
And hit the floor. But there is part of it. It all ties together.
It does. Jordan, I think the realities of what happened have really, really been an impact on Jordan. 2 weeks after the accident, Jordan packed up and moved to New York City to go to school at Marymount. We marvel at his ability to do that. 2 weeks later, we were wondering how we were going back to the classroom to teach. So how he just changed his entire life. And he talks about how hard that was and how important it was that he did that. Like, that was part of his dream, and he wanted that so much. But he has recently been talking about how Spencer's the glue. He glued us all together. And I think that is a beautiful way to talk about Spencer.
Here's the power of God. Jordan and I had gotten in a fight 2 years before. My fault. I'm the adult. I kicked him out of the house. I will regret that until I die. I've been praying about that. I don't know for how long. Because I knew he was going away to New York. Help me see Jordan before he leaves.
Yeah.
First time I saw Jordan in 2 years was in the trauma bay, August 10th. Jordan and I had not talked. We tried, but we got in fights. He comes down there, and that's the first time when we're with Spencer's body that I'd seen him in 2 years. And he took care of all sorts of stuff. He did a eulogy.
Oh, gosh.
If that hadn't happened, Jordan and I wouldn't be talking right now. And so that's God.
Jordan, over and over again, has been so resilient in all of this. And he has been a source of encouragement and support for his mom and for Steve in ways that none of us would have been able to reach in. Jordan has that ability to know what's needed at the moment.
I don't think I had talked to Jordan Spencer's mom for a year until we were in the trauma room. Yeah, but Jordan was great. And the other thing that happened like 2 weeks after, there was a point where I'm on Dillon Road and I'm flooring the car, wanting to do the same thing. I'm wanting to flip the car and do the same thing. And Holy Spirit, Jesus, stopped me at the last second. But I had been obsessing about it, thinking about it, and it was the van. I was going as fast as I could, and I wanted to vault the same place that Spencer did. I was by myself, and I stopped. It was completely irrational, and I haven't had that thought since.
And none of us know how we would respond to what you've been through. Hearing what you've told me, though, about Spencer and just kind of getting to know him through y'all, he never would have wanted you to have done that. I think you guys have just told an incredible story. I think it's just so encouraging to any of us to have that childlike faith like Spencer had, and to be willing to be transparent like you guys were. I hadn't even thought about this, but isn't that something that for Spencer, it almost like his healing place was the Y, and that you guys and I would meet at the Y and talk about him. Yeah. And then here we are again, being able to share this story with thousands of people who can benefit from just knowing that, you know what, there is hope. There's always hope. I know that y'all mentioned Compassionate Friends. Do you mind telling me just a little bit about that? Because I know there are other families out there who could really benefit from going to that.
Well, one of the things we found out early on, we kept running into parents, and this is God, who'd lost a child. I mean, it was just overwhelming. You'd bump into somebody, and you'd end up, yes, I lost a child. They're out there. They're in pain. I'm going to share the specifics.
Yeah, so Compassionate Friends was founded over 50 years ago in England. And it was a young parish priest who had two families in his parish to lose a child within a very short span of time of one another. And he struggled with what to do. How do I help these people? And literally, Compassionate Friends was born across a dining room table. And it's now an international organization. Within hours of Spencer's accident, I talked with a lady here in Thomasville who had lost her daughter, and she had wanted to start a Compassionate Friends. Kind of knew a little bit about it from there. She said, you look on their website, find it. 6 weeks after the accident, we called the group in Tallahassee, and Becky was a lifeline at that point. The pain, it's just overwhelming.
We didn't really fight, and about 6 weeks we just started fighting and stuff like that.
I've heard that it can happen with couples.
Yeah. And I think it's just because everything's overwhelming. You're mentally, physically, spiritually drained, and you have nothing for yourself to give, to take care of yourself, but you're also wanting to comfort and care for somebody else, and I think it just is overwhelming. But we called Becky, and Steve made the call, and I ended up talking with her, and we went to our first Compassionate Friends meeting 6 weeks outside of the accident.
You had heard me in.
Pretty much had to herd him in the room.
Wasn't going in.
I was like, I need to go in, but I'm not going in. We've missed very few meetings. Even in those early days, we talked about Thomasville needs this. So in December, we gathered other parents together, and we meet on the first Tuesday night of every month at 6:30 at Victory Baptist. And
Wonderful.
So it's really the goal is to have a place to talk about your children, your friends you talked about. One of the things that you want so desperately is you want to hear your child's name, and you want to hear stories about your child, and you want to be able to talk to people about your child. There comes a point where a lot of people just see, oh, there's this crazy parents who want to tell that story again, and they run away. But so crazy when you think about how we have stories to tell about the other 5 children and their new stories every day, but we have just a finite set of stories to tell about Spencer. So anything new is just precious. It's a precious gift, and it's precious to be able to share that with others. And Compassionate Friends gives people that opportunity.
Well, I'm so glad you guys are involved in that, and thank you so very much for your courage to come and talk to me today. And I want to just share with anybody out there that if they want to get in touch with you, they can reach out to me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org, and I would be happy to get anybody in touch with Robin and Steve DePaola. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much for letting us share a story.